This is another video about how Avatar is better than Korra, but you might actually hear something different this time, because unlike most people who talk about this, I don't glorify Avatar. I don't put it on a pedestal. I think it's a solid show, and I think it's one of the best American cartoons, but I don't think it's untouchable. I think cartoons like Teen Titans, Spectacular Spider-Man, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and Justice League Unlimited can all go toe-to-toe with Avatar, and even surpass it in certain areas. I don't have a rose-tinted view of Avatar, which is proven by my Season 1 retrospective on it. I won't bend my writing rules to favor Avatar and diss Korra. My rules are universal and mostly unchanging. With all of that said, let's get into the narrative problems of Korra Season 1. Before that, I want to give a quick summary of Avatar's formula. For the most part, each episode would be self-contained, and there'd be a problem that was solved in that episode. In the best episodes, at least one of the characters would have a character arc where they change their beliefs after learning a lesson. An example would be the Northern Air Temple. There would also be a theme that was executed in the climax of the episode, which could connect to the character arc or just be a message of the episode. An example connecting to an arc would be Warriors of Kyoshi. An example disconnected from the arc would be Imprisoned and Jet. This formula is simple, and when used effectively, it can result in a good plot, good characters, and a good theme. Now we can look at Korra's issues. In regards to plot, causality is an issue that lasts for the middle part of the season. In episode 1, the goal is to get an airbending teacher. That's fine. In episode 2 is to learn airbending. In episode 3, Amon and the equalist are introduced. In episode 4, Amon becomes public enemy number 1, but Korra refuses Tarrlok's task force offer until she's baited into joining. Episode 5 is about pro-bending, so is episode 6, but Amon interrupts at the end. Episodes 3 to 6 were where causality and logic become a problem. I'm giving 1 and 2 a pass because Amon wasn't properly introduced yet. If the story has an antagonist who hides in the shadows, then what do you think the most logical type of hero to combat him would be? Heroes and villains need a match. Darth Vader is a good villain for Luke, but not Batman. So what kind of hero should Amon be fighting? If you think like me, the most logical hero would be a detective of some kind. Similar stories that come to mind are Death Note, The Dark Knight, and Batman 22. All have villains that are hiding in the shadows, that are fought by a detective hero. So logically speaking, because the main antagonist is in the shadows and needs to be brought into the light, the protagonist should be a detective that does this. But Korra doesn't think so. The characters even ask this in episode 4. She has to be baited into joining the task force. Let's analyze causality and episodic storytelling in detail. In Avatar Season 1, the goal was get to the water tribe to learn water. The goal is to travel somewhere to learn bending. There are multiple logical ways this plot could be executed. One extreme is that it takes an episode to get to the location, and the rest of the season is spent learning the element. The other is that most of the season is spent on traveling, and the training comes at the end. Both make sense for the established goals, and both allow for episodic storytelling, especially the second, where traveling is the bulk of the season. Korra Season 1's goals are learn air and beat Amon. Logical ways to execute this plot include learning air for a majority of the season and saving Amon for the end, chasing Amon for most of the season after learning air, or doing both at the same time. All the extra nonsense like pro-bending doesn't fit into this, unless you include winning the pro-bending championship as one of the main goals of the story, but it's not, it's just a distracting side quest. But even if the writers wanted to make pro-bending a major plot point, would it logically make sense or be narratively satisfying for Korra to choose to focus on Pro rather than Amon after episode 3? No, all of it is unnecessary padding. The writers chose to have Korra's entire season take place in one location, and to have the main goal not require traveling. That's fine, but now you can't write it exactly like Avatar. The hero and the villain are in the same city. There's no reason the hero shouldn't be hunting him down after being made aware of his existence. But it seems like the writers wanted the privileges of writing episodic stories without actually creating an environment that would allow for episodic stories. Episode 3 only deals with Amon because Bolin was captured by him. In episode 4, Korra only worked with the task force because she was baited into it when Tarrlok got her to answer questions for the press with no preparation. Being hot-headed, when asked why she isn't doing anything about Amon, she promised that she'd start doing something. Furthermore, she doesn't do any deduction or clue hunting. She just gets ordered to fight some goons, and then she challenges Amon and loses, as usual. The villain has already made his move. This is the perfect time for the hero to get proactive and start hunting them down, like in any mystery story. But instead, the actual deduction is done by other characters off-screen, and Korra just does the fighting. If she's the protagonist of a mystery plot, then she should be uncovering the mystery. Episode 5 is all about Pro. Forget Amon. Episode 6 is about Pro, and Amon has to come to Korra. The villain in the shadows has to come to the hero because the hero isn't looking for him, and the writers have to remind us that he still exists. In the episode, she cares more about the finals than Amon. And don't forget, she still hasn't learned airbending either. In episode 7, it starts to get better, because technically Korra is doing detective work, but it actually starts with Lin being a detective, and Korra accidentally stumbling upon 2 important clues, which lead her to start working with Lin. Korra started the episode just fooling around with her friends until she overheard Sato. It was moving in the right direction, but having the hero solve the mystery by coincidentally being handed clues is not good writing. Korra was very reactive when she should have been proactive. Episode 8, halfway through the season, is where the show finally snaps in and makes Korra an active force against Amon. She created Team Avatar to combat against the equalists. From here on, there aren't any causality issues regarding the mystery because Korra was completely focused on Amon. No more pro-distractions or accidental, coincidental detective work. Except one more in episode 11. Korra and Mako decide to hide in an attic and accidentally find Tarrlok, who tells them Amon's secret, which is what they plan to use in the finale, and her genius plan is to shout out the truth at an equalist rally with no proof. As for the airbending subplot, they kinda just ignore it. In episode 8, Tarrlok brings up that her progress with air has been static. Then in episode 12, she just suddenly unlocks it when she sees Mako about to lose his bending, despite having had her bending taken away by Amon. And somehow she's now strong enough to beat Amon in a 1v1, despite getting washed by non-benders for the whole season. That was garbage, and it was especially painful due to the opportunities the writers laid out for themselves. I'll get there in character arcs. At the end, Amon gets exposed as a waterbender and the equals just disappear. The story doesn't even tell you what happened to them. Amon and Tarrlok die and that's it. The unbeatable fleet of killers just gets written out of the story because their leader ran away. They had Republic City in a chokehold, but that's just ignored and forgotten, out of mind, out of sight. Info outside of the show says that Amon being a bender caused the equalists to disband. This doesn't make sense. Just because their leader was a fraud doesn't mean that what he spoke of suddenly holds no weight. Logically, a new leader would take Amon's place, but I guess it's easier to write out the villains instead of having the heroes actually face them, and they'd logically lose because they've been losing the entire season. Now, character arcs and themes, another thing Avatar was good at. In episode 1, Tenzin has an arc where he goes from believing Korra should stay with the White Lotus to allowing her to train with him in the city. Episode 2 gives Korra a poorly executed arc about learning patience, which is undone in future episodes. This is also the theme of the episode. This had potential. She needed to learn airbending, but it was supposed to be a physical and mental journey. Korra using airbending text in the climax was amazing. The problem is that she learned it without internally developing. She was supposed to change by learning patience before being rewarded with the power-up, but she didn't. She even shows a lack of patience in future episodes. Avatar literally did this correctly when Aang learned earthbending. Additionally, when Aang tried to learn firebending before internally changing, he suffered consequences. Furthermore, she should have learned airbending here rather than the Deus Ex Machina at the end. Like I said in the last section, she just gets airbending because the plot demanded it. She had been showing impatience throughout the season, and even in this episode, episode 11, she chose to face Amon alone because of her gut feeling. No patience involved. Instead, strong emotions unlock her airbending, despite having her bending taken away. Tragic. Episode 4 gives Korra a character arc of admitting her fear. This is also the theme. Episode 5 had the opportunity to write in a theme about the importance of teamwork, but Korra just wins the match herself, so that went out the window. In episode 6, Lin had a minor character arc about softening her edges. This arc was poorly executed in my opinion, because it was resolved by Tenzin with one sentence, and she switches just like that. There's no event that convinces her to change her beliefs, just Tenzin saying, "Can we get along for once?" Episode 7 had neither, same goes for episodes 8 to 12. If you really wanted to reach, you could argue that Korra meditating in episode 9 is an arc because she couldn't before. I'd counter with the fact that getting better at something doesn't count as an arc if there's no change in belief. She meditated because she was in a cell with nothing to do, and Tenzin told her about the past memories. Aang progressively getting better at waterbending in season 1 isn't an arc either. In episode 12, Korra gets connected to her spiritual self because she hit her lowest point. No actual work put in, no change in beliefs. She lost her bending, which was out of her control, and that allowed her to connect to the past avatars. What is this writing? Would it be so hard to give her a character arc before rewarding her? Aang had to change to learn earthbending. He had to change to learn how to enter the avatar state. Zuko had to change to learn lightning redirection. He had to change to relearn firebending. So why does Korra never have to change to gain her rewards? Especially when it's set up that she needs to change. She was supposed to learn patience to get airbending. She was supposed to become more spiritual to connect to the other avatars, but the writers would rather make up new stuff to keep her the same. She started meditating in episode 9. That could have been the point where she became spiritual, especially since she saw Aang's memories. But instead, that's a one-time deal, and now the writers have to use the lowest point logic to make her spiritual again. But this time, she didn't actually work for it. And then Aang just gives her back her bending, along with the avatar state and energy bending. Why can he do all of that, especially as a ghost? Aang learning energy bending from the lion turtle was extremely convenient, but this is worse. Notice how Mako, Bolin, and Asami are missing? These are supposed to be main characters. Team Avatar. In Avatar Season 1, all 3 main characters had multiple arcs. Furthermore, even Zuko had arcs. Why do the villains, Amon and Tarrlok, have more character development than the main characters? These two are kinda carrying the season. Back to Korra. Since Korra is more serial, the writers could have gone with long-running character arcs. This is a character arc that lasts for the entire season. True Detective Season 1 is a perfect comparison. Both main characters had flaws that constantly impeded their progress in the story. By the end, they change and eliminate the flaws. Korra's long-running character arc could have been learning patience, which would have connected beautifully to her airbending journey. It would have worked well too, because she's still impatient after episode 2, despite supposedly having learned the lesson. There are several times where her impatience goes unpunished and she looks like a villain. In episode 8, her impatience gets her captured by Tarrlok. Tenzin has to teach her again in episode 10. She loses her patience again at the start of 11 and Mako has to tell her to relax. And then she loses it again when she decides to go after Amon. This time it's viewed positively. Did she learn the lesson or not? Here's the solution. Have her impatience constantly get her in trouble, but then in the season finale, have her learn patience, which will be rewarded with airbending. They literally had the puzzle pieces there, they just put them in the wrong order. Finally, time to get into my anime bag. If Korra wants to be treated like an adult, I'll treat it like an adult. The show wanted to tackle complex issues, but it failed because it had nothing to say. If we look at anime, we can find several examples of characters with clashing ideologies that are put to the test in the climax and properly resolved. Kenshin vs Shishio had natural selection. Ichigo vs Byakuya was about following the rules of the government. Naruto vs Pain had empathy. Naruto vs Neji had destiny. This season could have said something about Amon's equalist philosophy by having a battle of ideologies against Korra. In the final battle, Korra could have argued that bending is not the source of all evil and brought up examples of bending being helpful. Then, maybe destruction is caused by equalist members that would hurt their own men. And Korra uses her bending to save them, proving that bending can be good and that bending isn't evil, people are. That would be the action proving the theme right. Hold on, check this out. The bending that she uses to save the equalists would be airbending, which she finally unlocked after mastering patience before or during the final battle. Maybe this inspires the equalist to quit and allows for Amon to be defeated. She wouldn't even have to beat Amon in a 1v1 here. She could just prove his philosophy wrong and remove his political power. Furthermore, she could be like Naruto and point out his hypocrisy with how he uses bending to accomplish his goals. All of this would also resolve the issue of the equalist disappearing. The puzzle pieces are there. All I'm doing is properly assembling them with a formula. So overall, there are 4 character arcs in 12 episodes, 33%. If Korra had gone with the long-running arc, I wouldn't criticize it for not having more frequent arcs, but the writers decided to go with episodic arcs like Avatar, so I'm going to criticize it like Avatar. Avatar Season 1 didn't have an arc in every episode. From what I counted, Avatar had 12 arcs and 20 episodes, 60%. Gran and Sokka in episode 2, all 3 heroes in episode 4, Katara in 9, Aang and Zuko in 12, the Fortune Teller in 14, Aang and Sokka in 15, and Aang in 17. Korra had 2 themes in 12 episodes, 16%. Avatar had 12 themes in 20, again, 60%. Episodes 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Episode 9 had 2 themes, so Korra is also inferior in themes and character arcs. Everything from here on is extra, because if I'm being 100% honest, I don't think I would have cared as much if the story at least had the basics down. But because the story is full of holes, these minor issues become more apparent and less forgivable. The first issue is the elimination of culture. I understand that this is supposed to be a natural evolution of the world and bending, but the main problem is that the Asian cultural ideas is what made Avatar's world feel like Avatar. The main location has been reduced to 1800s America. Why couldn't it at least be China in the 1800s or some other time period? The bending has also lost its cultural identity half of the time. Before, each bending was based on a specific martial arts form. Now, all of them blend together and look more like MMA. Furthermore, what used to be elite has now become commonplace. Absolute randoms can lightning bend. Zuko's was connected to a character arc, which made it so amazing. Almost every earthbender can metal bend. I know someone will use the excuse that people naturally get better, but if you just look at sports, eliteness does not become commonplace. If you look at the elites in soccer like Messi and Ronaldo, or the elites in basketball like Jordan and Kobe, their level of skill doesn't just become common over time. There is still no one as great as them. And then, from a writing standpoint, why would you take something that was once sacred and a sign of eliteness and make it commonplace? Can't forget bloodbending. This is still reserved for the elite, but now people can do it without the full moon. The full moon was a balancing decision to ensure that bloodbending wasn't overpowered, but now that's been removed. Additionally, it's been powered up to be able to knock out people in seconds just by twisting them, and Amon can use it to remove people's bending. It's just bad decision after bad decision. The personalities of Team Avatar suck. It's strange because more minor characters like Tenzin, Lin, and Tarrlok are all great, but the main crew is so stale, except for Korra. Avatar made his group dynamic by giving each character at least one trait that was turned up to 11. Aang was positive, Katara was kind but also hot-headed, Sokka was pessimistic and logical, Zuko was hot-headed, Iroh was chilled out. Korra is aggressive, but what is Mako? Too emotionless? What is Asami? Too normal? Bolin was comic relief, but he was not funny, and when that's all there is to him, it's very hard to like him. And then I already covered the lack of any character arcs for these 3 bums. The romance was painful, especially episode 5. Now, Avatar's romance was corny too, but it never had a line like, "When you're with her, you're thinking about me." Is this what the writers think teens talk like? To be fair, I've seen this pulled off in an anime, but the difference is that the writer had enough skill to pull it off without making it corny. This was pure pain, no 6 paths. Furthermore, the romance is within the main group, including at least 3 of the 4 members, so the romantic tensions permeate nearly every episode after 5. It is horrible. Instead of giving Mako and Asami character arcs, the writers would rather focus on a corny love triangle where characters can't talk about their feelings properly, which results in obnoxious drama. These characters are nearly adults and act more childish than the Avatar gang. Season 1 ends with Mako cheating on Asami and Korra endorsing it. What am I watching? The comedy is also worse. Again, Avatar had corny jokes, but it also had a lot of jokes that landed. Korra tries too hard to be silly and it doesn't work. The bad guys are also too strong. All of the main characters are constantly losing to foot soldiers, but somehow the airbender kids and Naga can beat them with ease. Is it because the season was ending? Here's a positive. Korra has better art, animation, and music. The first 2 are to be expected since it came later. All of the fights are superior. The plot twists were also great, ignoring the effects to the setting. Mr. Sato being evil, Tarrlok being a bloodbender, and Amon being a bender, who is Tarrlok's brother. If you ignore the causality issues, Korra actually handled the serial episodic formula very well, especially starting from around episode 8. Earth's Mightiest Heroes is the golden standard for episodic serials, maybe Spectacular too, but this got close. Korra was overall more even when looking at individual episode quality. In Avatar Season 1, there were some episodes that I hated and will probably skip in a rewatch, but then there were also episodes that I loved and would consider making a video on. In Korra, all the episodes were just kinda okay. The only one I consider skipping is the romantic melodrama one. There were barely any scenes in Korra that elicited an emotional reaction apart from "that was cool," and most of the time, that was due to the visuals, not the writing. Avatar Season 1 had writing moments that got me hyped or emotional. The climax of the Kyoshi episode, Imprisoned, the waterbending scroll, Jet, the storm, and more. I've watched Korra before, but I went into this despising Korra due to all the videos I watched, but using my new grading system, I found that Season 1 isn't that bad. I didn't hate watching it. Most of it was actually entertaining, but the issues I mentioned were glaring and held it back from simple greatness. If just the causality, character arcs, and themes were fixed, the season would have been so much better. In conclusion, Korra Season 1 has issues with causality, character arcs, and themes. The causality isn't always clicking, the character arcs are few in numbers and rarely executed properly, and the themes are also few in numbers, but the main antagonist's ideology isn't even thematically discussed properly through the narrative. Korra Season 1 wanted to be an adult, but it didn't want to get a job, pay taxes, or buy a house. It wanted the benefits of being an adult without putting in the work. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and help me revolutionize the manga industry by buying my manga and spreading the word. All important links will be in the description.